My name is John Watson. I am the senior PCB engineer at a company called LeGrand Corporation up in Carlsbad, California. I do not work for Altium, although the shirt says the contrary. I had these two goons show up in my room this morning and threw the shirt on me, so fully understand that, okay? So I am a PCB engineer just like yourself, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. How many of you guys enjoyed that lunch? Yeah, it was okay. I've had better. No. Right? No, we really take care of you guys when you're here, and it's a pleasure. Now, how many of you this is your first time to AltiumLive? Wow, almost all of them. That's amazing. How many of you have heard me speak before? Oh, well, okay. I got somewhat of a following, I guess. I don't know. We came back anyway. Thank you. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be kind of speaking with you this afternoon. And, I've been doing a lot of work. I just recently bought a house. So I have actually 5 grandkids that I play with. And I'll tell you what, these grandkids are great. I love these grandkids. What's great about being a grandparent is you can pump them up with sugar before you send them home, and you get the call about the half hour later going, what did you do to my children, right? But I've kind of been playing, I'm a big prankster with my grandkids, so just kind of give you a warning. When you're doing pranks with your kids or grandkids or whoever, putting chocolate pudding in a whoopee cushion gives a whole brand new experience. Okay? Okay? It's a whole brand new thing, all right? So it's a real pleasure to be with you today, and I'm really great to be teamed up with Vince Mazar again. We actually teamed up last year, and it's a good pleasure to be with him again this year. I'm going to be talking, and I'm going to be handing it over to Vince. But we're going to be looking at some challenges that are facing us as designers. We have a lot of things going on in our business, in our environment that we're working in. And I'm going to be going through 3 of those challenges that we've gotten, and then I'm going to be wrapping it up with a final challenge that we have. How many of you guys have seen this? This is the 2020 Corvette. Nice, huh? This is a beautiful car. It's like, oh, wow. So what has happened now with this is completely redesigned. I think they said they only have like 2 original parts on this car. And it's a beautiful car, all right? They moved the engine back behind the driver now and everything else. It goes 6.2, it's a 6.2 liter V8, 500 horsepower, 470 pounds of torque at 5150. But the amazing thing about this vehicle is it actually goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. All right? I just wondered if you need extra insurance for that, for the whiplash that you get every single time you take off. I mean, that's a pretty intense takeoff. I think the last takeoff I had sort of like that was at the Superman ride at Magic Mountain up the road. But you actually have to shift through 8 gears on this car to get there. All right? 8 gears. So imagine that. You're sitting there, first gear, at a light, and you just floor it. And you take off, you're shifting in a second, now you're up to speed, and now you're shifting the 3rd, 4th, and so on. And you're at 60 now. It's like 1001, 1002, 1003. You're there. But what happens if you never shift out of first gear? What would happen? You'd still be sitting back at the light. The VW Bug that was sitting next to you would already be down the road, right? But so many of us treat our software like we're not shifting it out of first gear. We have a huge, powerful machine backing us. It's called Altium. And the software that we use and that the software that we have decided to use in our designs is a very powerful machine. It is a vehicle that we are using to progress our careers, to move our careers forward, to design some of the most innovative things that you could ever imagine. But yet for some designers, we never get it out of first gear. We never fully understand the power of Altium. I know very few designers that even use Altium, even 50, 60, 70% of the capacity that it can do. They're still not shifting gears. So my point is that our industry is going to be demanding us to shift gears. We have to shift gears. We have to reinvent ourselves on a regular basis. We have to develop our careers, our skills to match what the industry is putting out. All right? This here, the industry is going to demand us to shift gears. This is the good hard, fat fingers on a small thing here. There we go. There it is. This is the Goddard Space. There's the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. The first manned flight space. This is the one that they were actually. Okay, guys, what happened? All right, we're back. This was the computer that they provided to provide the first manned flight. This beautiful machine can be yours for a cutting-edge technology of 512 gigabytes of core memory at the beautiful cost of $3.5 million, the size of a car. It really was. Advanced 52 years, in November of 2017, iPhone put out their iPhone 10. The case was 5.65 inches by 2.79 inches, a 64-bit ARM V8 6-core CPU, uses 4.3 billion transistors, the neural engine that does 600 billion operations per second, and has a 3 gigabyte of RAM with an additional storage of 256 gigabytes. In 52 years, guys, we went from that to this. You hold in your hand 100 times more power than was in the first computer that put a man on the moon. Think about that. My challenge is this. Where are we going to be in another 10 years? How many of you are familiar with Moore's Law? Moore's Law says that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. This is an example back here in the 4004, 8008, back in 1970, and the progression of the use of transistors. But there is a question that a lot of people have now brought up. Is it slowing down? There was actually an article in a PCB magazine that was mentioning, is this whole Moore's Law slowing down? But not according to Jim Tully. He says that he is the chief of research for the semiconductors at Gartner. He says the technology will replace this as a bottom-up approach where chips will be assembled using individual atoms or molecules, which will be a new type of nanotechnology. Think about that one. Our industry is our very first challenge that we as designers are going to be facing. It is always changing. It's always shifting. It's always going to be improving. It's always going to be changing. Otherwise, I can tell you we'd all be having computers that would be $3.5 million the size of a car. We would still be back there. Our new advancements in our next 10 years are going to be mind-blowing. My personal favorite up here is this one up here, the Delphi Hyperloop. I was actually had the opportunity to work with the Delft University with their Hyperloop with the Elon Musk project this year. And it was awesome. I can tell you that. It was totally mind-blowing what these kids are doing. And I use that term loosely, but you know what I mean. To my age, they are kids, and they are doing some most amazing things that are unbelievable. They are the ones who are leading this push in our advancement, pushing into a new era of electronics. Some of these things are science fiction stuff. I actually had lunch today with two teams that are, anyone here from the Uber autonomous group or the Lyft autonomous? Any of you guys? Okay, they're not here. So I can talk about them. So, the two groups that were creating autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars. And I asked them, I said, okay, so basically the movie, the 1980 movie, Total Recall was right. We are all gonna end up in a Johnny Cab, okay? And with a robot standing there, say, where would you like to go, sort of thing. We're talking about computer brains or chips that have a dimension in size. They're talking about now putting computers that are going to be based on molecules and atoms that are going to be embedded in your head. These things are unbelievable, okay? So what does all this mean? The old methods will not work for us. They're not going to work for us any longer, guys. We have to reinvent ourselves. We have to shift gears. We have to shift our gears. We'll need new techniques, training, and tools to use. And that's a good part about Altium. They're always constantly improving their tools for us. They are always constantly giving us more horsepower in that engine, giving us more horsepower to help us with our job. And lastly, it can either rise to the challenge or you're going to be left behind. That might sound melodramatic, but it's really true. When you rise up and you become the leader in the industry as being a go-to person that can solve the issues that are going to be facing the industry, they're going to be knocking at your door, okay? The second challenge that we're facing is the changes in our ECAD software advancements. How many of you guys remember these things? How many of you guys have used these things? Yeah. You go home, little bits of blue and red Mylar tape on your clothes, right? Little X-Acto knife cuts that you had on all over your hands. But you know what? Some of the most advanced boards that were done, some of the advanced boards that were done and leaped the whole industry forward were done in tape and Mylar, with people like ourselves sitting in dark rooms at light tables. How many of you remember those days? And all the young people are going, what? What? No way. Yep, it was true. Yep. It all started rather modestly. Now, with the launch of Altium 18, many of you guys would remember that Altium went from the 32-bit platform and launched up to the 64-bit platform. That was an awesome thing for them to do. And along with that then came a lot of changes and a lot of improvements they did on their software, which included such things as Active Bomb, Draftsman, the new layer stack up, the impedance calculators, the active route. The list goes on and on. And these are all tools in your toolbox. And it's going to be important for you to keep up with all these changes. What I would recommend is that you learn the tool, learn the power of the tool, learn what you're actually driving here, and understand that there's so much benefit of what you can do here. And there are features in there. I actually had a gentleman, not at my present company, but a previous company that was, he was actually length tuning, doing a length tune. He had his Excel spreadsheet, which he was very proud of. that he was actually calculating out the height and the width of a miter of the frequency or of the length of the trace of what it would need to be, and he would then calculate that out and then draw it and then copy and paste it until he was kind of close, and then he would brought it down. He was just like unbelievable. I came up and I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm length tuning this line." I said, "Here, let me show you something." And I opened up the impedance, I opened up the design rules, went over down to the length tuning, said, "Okay, just plug in your number there," bam. He hit the trace and he went, bam, it automatically went out, and he goes, "Whoa, I didn't know it did that," right? Yeah, it does. How many of you guys remember the 1970s? I was a teenager in the 1970s. I remember very little of it, but I vaguely, all right? There's a big black hole somewhere around 1976 onto 79 area that, what's that? What's that? Disco. A disco, that's what it was, yeah. What? Oh, come on. There was something about silk shirts and polyester. It still excites me, all right? Oh, you have to admit, you wore a silk shirt in polyester, right? Come on. No. I don't know how I got onto that, but anyway, there used to be a commercial years ago, an Italian commercial for Prego spaghetti sauce. And the guy would come in, and he'd be the Italian, and his mother was at the stove with a big pot of sauce, and he'd come up and go, "Hey, what's the oregano?" And mom would go, "It's in there." "Where's the basil?" "It's in there." "Oh, okay. Whatever features you need from Altium, it's in there." Okay? They're always developing new tools. They're always developing. And what I would recommend for you is whenever they have a new release, learn that new release. Learn the new features, sit down with it, learn where you can plug those new features in to what you're doing and what your process is. Like, for example, when Active Route came out, we plugged it into where our routing was, and we learned how to reroute. Don't be satisfied with how you were doing things yesterday. The new tools that you have will make your job easier. That's my point. So we have now the new addition, which is your Concord Pro. That's a really great tool to use. But now we're also looking now at the future. How many of you are familiar with 3D printed electronics? Yeah, that's you know what? Altium already has it in their software. It's in there, all right? It's already set up for you. And the second challenge that we have is our component shortages. How many of you guys have experienced this issue about component shortages? Oh, yeah. Now, how many of you were here last year and I spoke about the same issue? Uh-huh. Well, we're still having it. It got less of a concern now, but it's still there and still an issue. It's gotten better, I will admit that. According to Octopart, they have right now 13,810,269 electronic components in their stock, okay? And how we're gonna handle, there's a lot of shortages in there though. We're still seeing some major shortages in the MLCC capacitors, the MOSFETs, different things like that. We're still seeing very long lead times, even up to some of the resistors now, up to 80 weeks. 80 weeks? That's over a year, okay? And what's happening now is a lot of vendors are now, a lot of part manufacturers, what they're doing is they're discontinuing entire lines that are not selling as good as others. So they're kind of consolidating their efforts, you could say. This is now still going on. So what you're seeing now is a lot of the surface mount components, the larger ones, are now being obsoleted for why? The smaller ones. There's no reason for you to put a big resistor in if you don't need it, okay? And what's happening is a lot of those products or those larger sizes are being obsoleted and they're being phased out. Those lines then are now being switched over to more popular ones. So that's how they're handling that. We don't see this slowing down anytime soon, guys. Where our industry is constantly increasing and growing. We're looking at next year, 8% growth, a 7% growth. This is all great news for us. Really, we're going to be busy. We're going to have a lot of opportunities in the future. So keep in mind that increase in growth is actually going to cause issues with our component shortages also. So there's three main sectors that are still driving this still. The IoT industry, it's estimated that 20 billion IoT devices will be deployed by 2020, which will be 100% growth. I know that I just put into my home smart lights, which are really cool. I would highly recommend, don't tell your wife that you got smart lights and sit there and play with the lights while she's in the shower. That's a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah, especially at a new home, and you say, "Well, dear, I think we may have some electrical problems," you know. So another sector is this phone industry. When you figure that there's estimated 3 trillion capacitors that are built, 1/2 of those will be put into phones this year alone. So this is so true. So you're the one who took our jobs. Remember this? Right? So that's going to be our second challenge. The third sector that's really driving the component shortage is the automobile sector, the autonomous vehicles. The gas engines use 2,000 to 3,000 capacitors. An electric vehicle uses 22,000 capacitors, each vehicle. So think about that. So this is what's driving all these component shortage issues. This just came in. There was in the automobile sector, a Wisconsin couple were treated for minor injuries at the local hospital emergency after their smart car hit a squirrel on Highway 8. The squirrel has refused treatment and has left the scene. He's breaking up back there. Go ahead. All right, I'll wait. Go ahead. He's got to get this. Got it? No. I will wait. I will wait for this. Got it? Okay. It's terrible, terrible accident. Terrible. One of the most important is going to be using the best tools. How many of you guys are using ActiveBomb now? Oh, good. Looks like an improvement from last year. This is good. ActiveBomb is your go-to tool for this whole situation of part shortage issues. I'm going to pass it over to Vince now, and he's going to continue the presentation.
Okay. My name's Vince Mazer. I'm a marketing engineer here at Altium, and we're going to discuss some strategies for tactics for part-related challenges. John did a great job of outlining the challenges that we're running into and why, and I'm going to try to impart some tactics that'll help you along that path. We're going to look at applying Altium's capabilities for these tactics. I'm going to summarize, and then John's going to summarize, and then we'll go into Q&A after. We would prefer for you to hold your questions to that Q&A period, but we'll try to do the best we can in addressing anything we have. So let's get into the 4 tactics. These are actions you can put in place today. It's getting to the point where it makes sense to put BOM management at the same level as schematic and PCB design. Too often, BOM management is almost treated as a post-process. You get your design done, everybody's all high-fiving each other, you tape out, Gerber out, and all that, and you generate your BOM, and then somebody else takes care of ordering that. I don't know if you've ever run into the situation, but I know I have before, where I find out I can't get parts from my assembly house, and that's really not the time you want to find out. You want to try to find out early in the process, and part of that is enabled by putting BOM management at the same level as schematic and PCB, and we have a graphic here that shows these overlaying domains. And at the end of the day, we're trying to get on-time realization of our circuit board assemblies. You want to improve your design time situational awareness, and that's the graphic with the scuba divers here. A lot of times, we're not aware that we might be using a part that has an end-of-life issue, has a pricing issue, has a stocking issue. One time I was at the World Trade Center in Denver, and we were listening to an FBI, a pretty well-known FBI agent talking about dealing with terrorism and crime, sort of a dark topic, but he said something that always stuck with me. And he said the number one reason people are victimized by crime is a false sense of security. You're unaware of your environment. You're lacking this situational awareness. Now, being out of stock with your part is not as big as a crime issue, but a lot of times companies get burned because they have a false sense of security. Oh, we've used that part last time on our design, our procurement has a great relationship with the vendor, et cetera, and then you find out late in the process. So one of the actions you can take is improving your situational awareness about the parts you're using. Hand in hand with that is checking your BOM status early, often, and throughout your process. I mean, parts are like airline tickets. What you find is available today at a given cost may not be the same tomorrow. Sometimes you even find that what's available today is more available tomorrow and at a better price. We'll get into that later, how you can use Active BOM to actually save a lot of money on your bill of materials. So check BOM status early, often, and throughout the design cycle. And if you know you have some parts that you have to have, and generally it's easy to say, but it's generally best to use common parts, use parts with a lot of substitutions, choose microcontrollers that have similar structures so that if you need to, you can swap them out. We've given the example before that you could use a microchip part that has standard temperature operating range, but also if you were in a bind, you could pay the extra 10 cents per part if you couldn't get that and use the extended temperature part. So establish contingencies early for risky parts. So now we're going to jump into what I call the use case demonstrations. I want to call your attention to this supplier part number panel. This is something you'll see in the demonstration today. It's also a tile that is increasingly finding its way into a lot of the panels with an Altium designer. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to first talk about the manufacturer part search panel. Now, this is the panel that you would use if you're trying to find a new part at the beginning of the design, or if you're trying to find a part that your current selection is not working out, you can't get it, or whatever the case may be. We're going to talk about the manufacturer part search panel. You can think of this as an outward-looking panel. It's looking at the global supply chain of electronic components. Everything that John was talking about with an Octopart. We're bringing all that data, aggregating that, and bringing that into your desktop. And it's coming right into the environment where you're actually doing the design. Now, the components panel, that is what I call an inward-facing type of a panel. It's looking at your component library. Now, depending on the size of your company, you may have a lot of projects that are using similar components. And I'm sure for those of you in larger companies, it's quite standard for management to suggest that you use those components first. They're already used in other products. You already, in some high reliability scenarios, you've had component engineering teams that have literally tried to catch them on fire and put them through extremes and have given them a good grading. So you would want to use that. The components panel allows you to search on what is in your existing library. And then we're going to also talk about the properties panel. What we're going to be demoing here is Altium Designer 20. And we have made some improvements in the properties panel, and we also have returned to having what we had formerly, like Altium Designer 17 and before, properties panel dialog. And we'll show you some of those improvements and such. And then we're going to delve into ActiveBOM. And again, you can think of ActiveBOM as the portal, if you will, for moving that design from out of your organization into the manufacturing domain, because that's where you can put all this together. It's also a great environment for costing, and throughout your design process, at any given time, you can find out what the price of your bill of materials is. Okay, so let me shift gears here. Okay, so I'm in Altium Designer 20 here. We just have a simple design. And the first thing I want to show is the manufacturer part search. Have any of you used this capability yet? Very nice. The first thing that comes up is, and I will mention that right now I am connected to a Concord Pro library environment. I've got that running on this system as a server. So we have various panels here. I'll make this or sub-panels here. I'll make this bigger. But let's just say I'm searching for, some, let's go ahead and just look at, let's choose some capacitors here. And what it's doing right now, I'm connected to the internet, is it's going out and checking what's available based on what I've put in. So let me go ahead and just say I'm looking for a 100 nanofarad. One of the capabilities that's relatively new, I think it came out in 19, is that we have unit sensitivity. It understands that 100 nanofarad is the same as, 0.1 microfarad. And will present it as such. And there's just an incredible amount of information. At the risk of dating myself, I remember when you had to really sort of go down to the lobby, meet with a vendor, and sort of hope that they would leave you with the data book that had all the stuff in there you needed. And they weren't going to leave you the data book if you were a small company. They only left the data book if you were working for, something like Rockwell, like I was at the time. But it's just amazing to me that we have access to all of this information. So let me go ahead and just give you an idea of what we're showing here. I'll just pick this first Chemet capacitor. The first thing is we have a link to the actual manufacturer's part website. We have these SPN, that's supplier part numbers. This is showing the current stock. And all of this is while I'm choosing which component I want to use. I can go to any of these vendors' actual pages and at that point, add that to my cart or order it. And you can see this is an incredibly well-stocked capacitor right here. Everybody seems to be green. There's a couple of red boxes, and when it's red, you've got an issue. So that's a supplier part number panel. This little icon here, that model, means that the models are actually available. And we can choose to download this or acquire it. Now, if we acquire it, We can add our own parameters to it. It could be our own part number that we use internally at the company. There could be some reliability gradings on that, whether it's automotive or certified for high voltage or whatever. And then we can acquire that into our own proprietary library in the Concord environment. We can also just download it as essentially an integrated library. And then we can place it from this environment too. We actually recommend that you acquire it and then place from the components panel, which we'll get into next. But that's just basically how you want to do it and what your policies are for using new components. So continuing on, we've got all of our parameters here. On the horizontal bar, you can see the case, the mounting, voltage rating, a huge amount of parameters here, which brings up a really good point. I can choose this little filter icon, and then that allows me to use, I guess, what we could call just, sort of like if you're going to those selection sites for components at the website, you can say, okay, I want to, of this group, I see that I have 307, 77, 0805, so I can click that. It's a way for you to check the parameters off that you want to again, narrow down your search. And right now we're showing 377. And you see up here in the top, we've got our filters that are being entered in the top. Now, if I wanted to delete or remove that 0805, I could simply click on that and the results will update. You've got access to your data sheets from various suppliers. We discussed the download area. Again, this little icon here means that you've got models available and you can preview these. We can look at the 3D version if we want. And the whole idea is to really get and completely vet your components before you choose them. The data sheets are listed here. We also, this is really cool because in the background, we're looking for this component. We've chosen this one, but it's also showing me alternatives that are available, and we put a grade on that, basically 1 to 10 grade, based on a variety of factors. And so this assists you in identifying the components that you would want to. And again, returning to the panels here, we've got all the types of termination, sizes, all the types of information you would see in a data book we have presented here.
Will these screens show the company internal part master listing alongside external vendor parts as well, so you can see what you already have?
Well, at this point, we're looking outside with the manufacturer part search. When we go to components, the components panel, which you can have up side by side, then you could look at what you currently do have in your library and such. So these are the alternatives here. And these are a variety of just incredible filtering. The idea is to quickly zoom into your chosen situation. Let me go ahead and look at all these categories we have. I mean, that's how it's all categorized. And if I choose microcontrollers, this is really helpful. If you've ever had to choose a microcontroller, and as you likely know, that's a very important decision. If you've had to choose a microcontroller, there's a variety of factors you're looking for. Number of interfaces, amount of memory. We bring all of this, and again, I have not left Altium Designer. I'm in Altium Designer, and we've brought all of this here. We can look at the packages. We can look at the frequency of the clock. Interfaces. Do you need a CAN interface on there? You just click it, and you're presented with all of that. Temperature ranges. And what's nice about this, now you can go to, say, vendor X, and you can do this parametric search at that website, but you're looking at the whole world of microcontrollers right now. in one environment here. So that's the manufacturer search panel. You can also collapse this if you want to turn that information pane off. You can make it real small. You can do what you need to. And like I said, the idea here is to look at the outward supply of components and look at bringing a new one into your library. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to look at the components panel, and we're going to see that it's similar. There are some differences, but we're going to see that it's similar. Now, I might also say while we're talking about this is if you're using any what I would call conventional Altium libraries, your integrated libraries, database libraries, they're all available from the components panel. The components panel took over for what the libraries panel was in the past. And for those more traditional libraries, what we call file-based libraries, this is where you can come in there from the so-called hamburger menu and choose what's installed and bring in libraries, from the project or use the search path. This is, legacy, I guess, or what I would call classic Altium, of which there are still a variety of companies that use these integrated libraries. And what I have here is I'm looking, the message I want to get across here is that this is the one place where you can place from any type of Altium libraries. So I am connected to Concord, and you can see that we have all these categories: audio, batteries, capacitors. This is a completely free-flowing type of field. Any type of categories that you have, if it's automotive rating, rad-hardened rating, maybe something that's very unique to your particular application, you can add those here. We deliver it with a set of common ones, but you can add anything you want here. And so similar to the manufacturer part search panel, you can see I can bring up capacitors. Let me resize my windows a bit here. And you see that I'm looking at the data here. There's a really important aspect to this, though, that we list all the part choices that we've added for this. A lot of times when you're using discrete, you might use a generic name. It's 100 nanofarad, 16 volt, 0805. And that's what shows up in your bill of materials. And it can be spec to a Chemet product or Vishay or some other. And that's what we call these part choices. And you can add these at the time you create your component. And that's part of that planning for the worst scenario, because these are backup parts in case your primary parts aren't available. And so this gives you the ability to strategically plan for those types of scenarios, and hopefully you'll never run into them. Another really important aspect, especially in a multi-project environment, is this where used. Where used is going to tell you where that particular part is used, and it may be in multiple projects. Some of them might be low volume projects, probably not too exciting. You might want to use, if you have a high volume project that you're working on, you might want to use something that's currently used in a high volume environment. The key is this information is here. And again, this is right in the schematic. You're not going to an external website. You're not having to pick up the phone, call anybody else. I mean, I realize some of you may work in organizations where there are people whose job it is to do these types of things. But a lot of times, again, even with airline tickets, we have to book through a travel agent. I always do my own research first and then give them my selections and see if it maps to our policy. So you can do that with components too, and it does land up saving you some time. There's a lot of information, like I said, in this this information pane. You can see the symbol. Also, one thing I didn't mention when we were showing the manufacturer part search, when you move that into your component library, you can have that go through the templating process of the component library, and you can, for instance, require that they put an application in there, or require that the company part number is included. And you can also link those to your already existing schematic symbols. So the idea is that we're not trying to replace what you've already got organized in the area of components. We're trying to supplement that. So we can see that this is pretty similar to the manufacturer part search. We list footprints. You can put any of the parameters that are important to you. You can bring that out into this environment. And of course, you can either right-click and place or go ahead and just do the drag and drop. So that's the components panel, I believe. Let me just review all of this. I think we've covered all the important parts. One thing I didn't mention is you might see, even in the manufacturer's part search, you might see this little, in this case, green bar. It's usually a different color. If that bar is red, it means that, you know, that's like an end-of-life part, or it's not available. And at any given time, we've aggregated all this data on this particular part, and we can show you how many are in stock and what's the current price. And again, this is while you are getting ready to place a component in a schematic. So and that underscores that idea of that situational fluency. It may not be a big deal sometimes, but sometimes you're placing or you're even looking at properties, as we'll show next, and you find that this part you thought you could get, it's no longer available. So along those lines, let's go ahead and look at the CPU section of this schematic. I'll choose one of these bypass capacitors. And then, as we've done many times, you look at the properties panel. So this is new for Altium Designer 20. Hopefully I'm not stealing anybody's thunder on anything. But this is a new layout. I mean, and what I've got here is what we call the modal dialog. You notice that if I try to even pull up another panel or anything here, it's not going to even be active, because right now we're wanting to be right near the part that we're interested in changing. It brings it up right in this environment. So one of the first things you see is that we can look at all or none of the parameters. You know, some companies put a lot of parameters in there and it can get unwieldy. We had these parameters in previous versions behind a tab. The customers really didn't care for this. This is an aspect that they wanted to have. And so we brought it back. And you have the ability to push button filter based on, you know, like footprints, or if you had any models, parameters, links, if there are any rules that are associated with that component. And once again, I mean, this is just, to me, is the neatest thing, because you can really find out. We're trying to always let you know if there's issues with your components or if there's an opportunity to improve pricing. So you've got these supplier panels here, you've got data sheet, you've got all that information. Now, again, there is some similarity across all of these panels, but they are intended for different parts of, you know, the design process. So this is something that we use a lot for, you know, if you want to add or update a reference designator or add another parameter or whatnot. And we can see that, you know, we've got a lot of part choices for this particular part. A lot of backups if we have any issues. And that's basically the big changes for the properties panel. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into Active BOM. I've got a document here. And again, what we see when we go into that document, when you first open that document, if you're just going back into it, the first thing it does is it goes out, again, to the cloud, and it loads all this data. And it takes a while. I mean, it's going out there and pulling all the current data on these parts, and will give you an update on to how things are looking. Now, we have on this right side, we have what we call these Bom Check Indicators. And we can talk about that a bit. Certainly the green check mark is good. I mean, that basically is saying, hey, the part that we've decided, or that Active BOM has decided, is meeting your cost and availability objectives. That's available in the stock you need. You notice right now that I've got a production quantity of 1. Well, that makes it a little easier to find stock. Let's just see what happens when we put in 500. It still looks pretty good. One of the first things you see is that we have a price per board metric that comes up here. It's pulling the information from the cloud, aggregating that into the BOM list here, and we can see, you know, the supplier, the cost. And it's smart enough to know that, you know, if you've ever had to buy parts, a lot of times you have to buy a whole reel, because it just makes the most sense to buy the whole reel, because even if you buy half of a reel, right, you have to pay a reel fee usually to somebody. So it's smart enough to know those things. And we'll give you an indication with that BOM check. And let's talk about those BOM checks a little more, because, you know, you can think of this as being like, you know, a DRC, a DRC for your bill of materials. And we can see the BOM checks here. They're combined, so we can see the different areas that we have issues with. The panels menu, when you're in Active BOM, sort of takes on a different personality. It's very focused on what it is we're trying to do, which is to optimize the BOM. You can also determine what columns you want available. There's just a lot of parameters that you can bring forward, both from your own library and from the cloud, if you want to present that in that bill of materials. I mean, you can go to the point of you know, just selecting any of this type of information from various sources. You can also choose your favorite suppliers. I'm choosing them all right now, but you know, if you really only do business with, say, Mauser, DigiKey, and Arrow, well, you can choose that. But I just have it wide open here to choose all of the different suppliers, and we probably have, I think we have around 200 suppliers that are connected through the Altium component cloud. Pardon? You know, I think they are broken out by, like, you know, Farnell Europe and all of that. And you could just enable that and give that in a given priority.
What if you have preferred pricing with the vendor? Is there any way to access?
Well, what you can do is you can come in here and you can create a manual solution. I believe that you can even put that information on the component side of things, that pricing, and it will just come in. So, and there's also in this bill of materials, you have the ability to put non-electronical components in here, like, say, glue or wire or heat sink compound. You can put all of that in there, because, you know, sometimes that can add a lot to the total board cost or the cost of your hardware and your standoffs. And you can either enter those directly into this BOM doc, which is a separate document. It is stored as a separate document, and these project settings and the environment is stored in the project settings for the project. And so it is like its own different design domain, like we said at the beginning, supplementing schematic and PCB. But you can come in here and you can, let's go ahead and do this here. You can add new manage component, a custom item, custom row, any type of information. You can even add custom columns that maybe these parameters aren't in your part, but you want to call it out right now. Like, I don't know, sometimes when I've done designs, there are always a few parts that need to be manually installed. And so you can put that in right here. What I did in the past is I would generate my BOM into Excel, and then I would just add that. But you can do that right here. There was a question back there?
Yeah, can you globally add parameters, like, so that parameter will be present on all those parts on that?
Yeah, you just do the custom column here, and then you edit this like a spreadsheet, and it becomes part of that.
DNL, like, you know, loaded, it'll list that on every component.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I haven't tried that right from this environment, but you can put that on there, or you can also, if you have it in the part itself, it could be brought forth into this environment. So sometimes the point is you can either define that parameter, the do not load parameter, in the actual part on the schematic, or you could just do it at this level right here. Right. You could do that right here, just doing like add the column, enter that in, and do a copy and a paste as you would in Excel. Okay, so material here. Let's different ways to represent it. Right now we're in a base view. If you wanted to use what we call the flat view, you can do that. If you have variance in your design, you can list it by using what we call the consolidated view. I tend to use the flat view. The grouping is really a useful capability. Let me see if we have anything that makes sense here. Let's go. I'm going to go ahead and group by value. So if I go in here and group by value, as it implies, it's going to group by value. So I can look through here and I can see, you know, I've got 2.2 microfarads. I've got these. You know, this looks very well. I do have 200 here that has 2 items. Looks like there are two different resistors here. There may be an opportunity. I don't know that the specs are completely different, but the point is that sometimes you've chosen multiple components in your design when you can actually just choose one. So this is a tool for making sure that you don't have that in this situation. So you can find duplicates fairly easy and consolidate them. Pardon? Can you resolve it here? I think you'd probably need to go back to the schematic, which brings up a good point. You'd need to go to the schematic and change that. I mean, that would be you'd want to change that component because that component in the schematic is actually calling that part. And you can do this and you can say, okay, I want to cross probe. And then we go ahead and do that. And if I've done it right, it should highlight. Now, I think what we have there, by the way, is that the values are the same, but one is a discrete resistor and one is a resistor pack. So maybe that wasn't an opportunity to consolidate. But again, the ability to cross probe from the BOM, again, is indicative of the fact that this is a design domain in and of its own. Very handy for fixing these things. If there was an opportunity, you could go to the one. I mean, there's multiple ways. You could go to the one, do a copy of that component, paste it, or you could choose another component. So that's active BOM. Go ahead and clear that filter. Yes?
So ActiveBomb, as part of Altium, provides a live database for all of those materials and projects you're working on, if you're using Concord?
Well, it works best with Concord. Concord Pro has some infrastructure in it that this whole environment is tuned for. But having said that, there are options. You can come in here and say you're not using Concord, you're on an old integrated library. You can go into this active BOM, and the only thing is that you need to go into each line item and just go ahead and create a manufacturer link. Okay, that's one way. So you can actually associate the part or parts that you want for that line item from your bill of materials. You can make that association right in this active BOM document. You save it and retrieve it. That's one approach. Right. Now, when you are using Concord Pro in that environment, you're able to upload component lists from that PLM system. Yeah, you'd have to have. Now, there's another caveat. If you're able to get that list out of your MRP or whatever it is you're using, you can also put the parameters inside of the parts. And I don't have any integrated library parts in here, but I can show you this manufacturer link button would be highlighted if we did, and you can do that linkage here. So you would have a parameter in your part like manufacturer 1, manufacturer part number 1, manufacturer 2, manufacturer part number 2. And you tell ActiveBomb where to find that data, and then it will bring up all this nice supplier data. It's just not as elegant. And it's not because we don't want to make it elegant, it's because the foundation is optimized for Concord Pro. So there are multiple ways to do that. These are what we call ranks. And this is what you enter. Okay, this is a way of designating. Let me find something that has here's a good one. Has a lot of different suppliers. In fact, if we see this is the only part that's ranked, so it's going to always try to use this. But if we wanted to, we could say make this a 4-star, and then make the other one a 5-star, and then it's going to update and it's going to use that one. So what these rankings are, it's your determination as to how you want that particular part ranked. Is that your primary, your secondary? If you really don't care, you can just rank them all 5s, and then it just makes the choice based on the price. Okay. Also, there comes a time when, you need to do a bill of materials report. And we have, you can take this bill of materials, you can place it in your draftsman document. It's got a wide variety of downstream application. It's a placeable object. You can also go to let me make this a better size here. You can set your properties, and you can, output this to wherever you want to output it, as far as, whether you want to go to, CSV, tab, MS Excel, PDF. It's one environment to take the view that we were looking at and go ahead and output that downstream. And this is where you could pull that information and go into your MRP system if there's an inputter on that side. So that's basically the review of the capability I wanted to discuss. What I'm going to do now is go back into the presentation, pick up where I left off here. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and summarize, and then going to invite John to come back up and have his closing comments. And then we'll open it up for a wider ranging Q&A. At the end of the day, Altium Designer supports proactively addressing these component challenges. I mean, it gives you this awareness throughout. I don't know what it's like out. I haven't worked as a designer in a reasonably sized company for a while. But in general, it seems like designers are taking on more responsibility. I know back when I was a designer, I never had to worry about bill of materials. We just used whatever and they took care of it. It's not necessarily that way. And the key about this is it's bringing it into your environment. It's bringing it into the designer's context very conveniently and where it's actionable. Again, reverting back to like Homeland Security, they say if you see something, say something. Well, even if it's not your responsibility, if you're seeing a problem with your parts that you have in your design, it's better to find out about that ahead of time than late in the cycle. The key Altium Designer panels are what I'd say instrumented for this part awareness. The properties panel now has those supplier part numbers and all that information below there. They're instrumented for that. I call the manufacturer part search, the components panel, and ActiveBomb the triad of component selection and sourcing efficiency. Manufacturer part search, that's where you look for new materials, new parts external to your organization. Components panel is where you look internally using the parts that you already have in stock or already have purchase agreements with, or already have proven quality. And then Active BOM brings all of this information together to enable you to make sure you're hitting your price targets, to make sure you don't have any surprises or anything like that. And again, the properties panel and dialogue, that's again new for Altium Designer 20. It provides you a supporting role, if you will, for that task throughout the design cycle. Because as I know you probably realize as an Altium Designer user that you go into those panels quite a bit. And that's was all I wanted to cover. And at this point, I will toggle back to John's presentation.
Great.
You should be good to go, John.
The first three challenges I gave you was that we have a change in our industry. We have a change in our ECAD tools we're using. We have a change in our materials that we're using. And it's a challenge. And I have one more challenge for you. Here you are, day one of AltiumLive. And I hope you take to heart what I'm about to talk to you about. Everything else was external. But this one here, this is internal. This is about you and about what you want to get out of this upcoming week and what you want to get out of your career, what you want to get out of this industry that you've invested your life into. I would hope that you come into this week with a kind of an open mind. I find that a lot of times we operate in 4 circles in our lives. I work with a lot of designers, worked with a lot of designers in 20 years experience, and I've seen every single one of these types of people. That number one is you have the person who lives in his comfort zone. He doesn't want, don't ask him for anything more. Anything that makes him uncomfortable in any way. He wants to be able to feel safe and in control of everything that's around him. He doesn't want to have any surprises. Life isn't like that, guys, and especially PCB design is not like that. I was asked one time, how many of you are familiar with the process of a DFEMEA? DFMEA. Okay, when you sit people into a conference room and you say, well, what could go wrong? And what are we going to do about that sort of thing? And they asked me, well, what can go wrong on a PCB design? I said, thousands of things can go wrong on a PCB design. And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, I have seen some of the weirdest things. All right? I was having lunch with Teresa today, and I was telling her a story about, we got PCBs back from a fab house, and you looked at the PCB, and underneath the solder mass, there was a mosquito. You would have never imagined it, right? There's a mosquito embedded in my board. So what can go wrong? Anything. But the person who works in his comfort zone, he doesn't want to get out of that comfort zone. He doesn't want any of those surprises. He doesn't want any of those situations. And when he's out of that comfort zone, he immediately goes into the fear zone. What if? What if this happens? What if that happens? This is the person who lacks the self-confidence, who's prone to failure. They find excuses, which is usually blaming somebody else, right? I'm not where I want to be, and I'm not where I'm doing what I want to do because of that person or this or that. I'm going to inject that right now. If you're not where you want to be in your career, you only have one reason for that, and that's you. You. It's not the industry. It's not your tools. It's not your basis of knowledge. It's not based on your education. Okay, this is based on what your potential is. Some of the most brilliant designers that I have seen have been the ones who don't have the college education. A lot of times you come up with excuses for why you can't do something. Well, I can't do it because of this, and this. Right? And they never have an excuse of why they can do it. Right? You know what I'm talking about? If you're going to work in this industry, you're going to have to kind of sidestep all the excuses that why you can't do something. Well, I don't have enough education. That's no excuse. Everything you need to know, everything you need to learn is written down somewhere. Hey guys, I went through school. We didn't have Google. All right? How did we survive? We survived. But now, everything you need to know is written down somewhere. Go find it. I challenge you, go find it. The third zone, though, is where you guys are at. I find that a majority of people who come to AltiumLive, who make the sacrifice to come here, all right, and to participate in something like this is now they're working in the third zone. They're working in the learning zone. And I think you guys are tuned into that. You are in the learning zone. You're rising to the challenge. You're dealing with the changes and the problems. You're acquiring those new skills. You're extending out your comfort zone. I want you to notice something. If you're in the comfort zone and you want to get to the learning zone, the only way to go through that is through the fear zone. You got to go through the fear zone, guys. You just do. It's just the natural process of things. And a lot of times people, when they know they need to get out of their comfort zone, and I'll tell you what, a lot of times that you get kicked out of the comfort zone, right? You get kicked out of there. Things in life, things happen, things that occur. You get kicked out of your comfort zone, and now you're in the fear zone. And if you stay there in that fear zone, it will end up killing your career. Keep moving forward. There's a last zone, and that's called the growth zone. That's where I hope you get this week. And I hope that's what you keep a hold of when you leave here, is that growth zone. Don't go, if you're in your comfort zone in your work or your fear zone at your work, leave it. Leave it behind. It's not gaining you anything in your career. Nothing. There's a learning zone. There's a growth zone outside of that area. And all you need to do is keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. You see, the final challenge is us. It's us in our head, in our thinking, how we see things. We're our own worst enemy, right? We are our own worst enemy. We want to go back to our comfort zone and our fear zone, and we want to operate. We just want to sit there and wallow in our self-pity, right? Making up excuses why we're not where we have to. It's because of them. No, it's because of me. If I'm not happy where I want to be, then I make the change. And I would hope that you leave this convention this week a changed person. I really do. A person who has now moved on to the learning zone and moved on to the growth zone. Why? Our industry is depending on you. Hey guys, I'm retiring. I'm closer to retirement than some of you young people. And I hope that you rise up. You're going to be taking my place. You're going to be filling my shoes. And I have full confidence in knowing you're going to do a great job. You're going to do a better job than we ever did. You're going to create new things. You're going to bring forth the innovations that we never even dreamed of. You're going to be the builder of the dreams. You're going to be coming up with these brand new technologies that we only saw in science fiction movies. But it's going to take somebody who's not satisfied with the comfort zone and living in the fear zone, but you got to move on, the learning zone and the growth zone. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you.
We can open it up for Q&A.
Yes. Q&A?
If I may say something, Q&A, you get another chance to win at the raffle. So if you ask questions, I will give you a ticket.
Regarding we use ActiveBomb quite a lot, and actually very, very much in the manner that you presented. What I'm just wondering is there are a couple of vendors that our organization has special pricing. Is there a mechanism in place or visualized where that would be taken into account too for the pricing information?
My understanding is with Concord Pro that you can put that information on that server and it will feed into ActiveBomb.
Okay.
I haven't done it myself, but that's a pretty common.
Yeah, we're still using Vault 3.1 or something of that. We haven't upgraded. That's supposed to happen when I get back. Oh, okay. Good to know. That's really good to know.
We're still using the integrated libraries, mainly because it's me. We don't have a team effort. I've seen that you've got some capabilities with ActiveBomb. I've used a little bit of it. I saw it last year, but it doesn't seem to be as easy to use. Is that something, is there a way for me to do more integrated without going to the expense of Concord Pro for just where we don't need to have a big managed library arrangement?
Well, what you can do is, like I said, in the actual ActiveBomb document, say you have all your parts come in there. There you can assign part choices. And it is a once per design. So if you did another design just like that, you could reuse that same ActiveBomb document, and that information would be maintained, and then the new line items would have to be filled out. But really the better way to do it is to have it in your library so that you don't have to do that. And what we do have with the integrated library, it isn't as convenient, but you do have the ability to put, like I said, manufacturer, say it's a resistor, KOA Spear is your manufacturer, and this is the part number. And then it will go out and it will look for that and show you all of that information. Now, if you find that 2 years from now those part numbers have changed, the way to do it would be to go back into that integrated library, that particular part, and then update that parameter. That's the best that we can do. Those are the two scenarios right now.
So you want to have the manufacturer and the manufacturer's part number as parameters in the component.
Correct. And you can do multiple ones. So if you had 4 different parts that you could possibly use for that. In a ways back, we had those supplier links that you can add. But that was a supplier part number driven scenario. So it would be DigiKey and this part number. And it was real easy to add those. You would just add it right to the parts. The problem is that was just from a single supplier. The nice thing about the new approach is that it's you have manufacturer part number, and then it checks all the different suppliers. But there is that upfront work. And smaller companies are dealing with that, and I don't know where we are with the cloud-based services as far as, but I think for smaller companies there are going to be a Concord Pro-like options that are affordable. I don't know what we'll be talking about that. I think throughout the.
I have one thing. Right on the manufacturer panel, if you can find a component that you're looking for, you can copy the manufacturer part number and the manufacturer name, so I can select them both and copy them right into your component. That way you have everything matches up and it finds it right after the bottom.
Right.
Back here, Vince.
Yes.
So under the manufacturer part search, there was a rating and a circle on the right-hand side.
Right.
That I think you said it was supplied by Altium. What is that based on? Is it availability, quality?
It's looking at a mix. And one thing I didn't mention is that we do have life cycle indications on our parts in ActiveBomb. Go ahead and get over here. We do have, like on this part here, it's a not recommended for new design. And here's the deal. This is a perfect example. It's not recommended for new design, but Mauser currently has 234,000 of these guys. So what we do is we look at the status of a given part, and we use our own internal algorithms, and we come up with a recommendation as to what the status of that should be. It's not an authoritative indication. If you look at parts, you're going to see, like if you were to go at that part, you'd see at the Mauser listing, if they had a product change notice, they would have that listed and they would be showing right there in the part if it's going end of life. So it's not uncommon for us to see a rating like that where you may not get it validated with the information from the supplier. So we do come up with a rating for that. Now, along those lines, to get back to your question, we are looking at price, we're looking at availability, and we're looking at that life cycle indication to come up with that rating. And a good solid match of parameters as far as,
Are you ever going to expose, like, where's the source of that information? Because if I've got a part I'm about to put on a board, and Altium is flagging it as not recommended for new designs, and then I go to the Murata site, they don't have any EOL information about it. As far as I can tell, Murata is going to make that thing forever, right? And the fact that it's being flagged, it just, it scares the hell out of me, because it's like, I don't want to put this on my board if it's not going to be available next month. But there's no indication from, I would consider Murata to be the source
Right.
of truth about that part. It's
Right.
their part. And so when somebody else, third party, comes along and says, oh, Murata's going to discontinue that, that makes me nervous.
Well, I mean, we're not saying that. We're just saying it's not recommended for new design. But I know exactly what you're saying. I personally would want to see the product change notice from the vendor. Exactly. I think where this comes in useful is take the extra look. That's what this means to me. Is when you see end of life or whatever, it may not be end of life, but it means at least take a look at it a little more. And I think we are looking at evolving our algorithm. I think there are opportunities to actually see the components that have the product change notices and sense that authoritatively from the vendor and carry that forth through here. But right now, the way that I would use these flags is just dig a little deeper. And you can turn those off. You can mute those.
And this is how the council reported it. If you find a discrepancy, there's a built-in report.
Good point.
And then they'll fix it. They get data from all over. And they usually update from the suppliers, and the manufacturers, and the spreadsheet are up to date. But if there's a discrepancy built in, I just had an incident the other day, put it in, they fixed it, and it was, so they usually try to keep it in. What you see here should match what you see from the manufacturer.
Yeah, my understanding is it's that each of these suppliers, they have their own API that you write to access that data, and there are times that we are out of sync with that. Pardon? Yeah, that's where I understand that we're getting our data.
Yes, SEVA actually supplies the manufacturer lifecycle data, but all the supply chain availability, that's all.
Right.
What I understand.
Right. There are times, I mean, just like this gentleman said, I mean, there are times when you run into just what he said. And that's something that we're trying to bring attention. I think there are opportunities to scrub this data a little better. And it's.
Don't get me wrong, I love the active one. It's way better than anything like we had before. Right? Way better.
Right.
But when you run into those little deficiencies, then it makes you start to think, well, how many of the things that are not flagged should have been flagged?
Right.
If we got false negatives, well, how many false positives are there?
Tell about the last updated. Tell about the last updated check on it. There's no last update. They show you when it was last updated. Sometimes, because they rely on getting data from the manufacturer vendor, it'll tell you the last time that it was updated. So if it hasn't updated in a few weeks or a couple weeks, then you can kind of approximate out.
What about a button to click to say, go and update now, please?
Yeah, now that's one thing that's really hard because the suppliers, the distributors sort of, give us they only give us so much time to go in there to pull that information. So we can't just do it on demand.
I part pretty regularly, and for the most part, it's accurate. There are times where it isn't. There'll be an inventory level on there that's not, you always got to double check things if they're not to be constantly around the clock.
Yeah.
Most of the time,
So like these parts right here, this is sort of warning. It's not red, but it just says, hey, it's because it's been updated just yesterday. Whereas this was this was updated yesterday. Now this is red because or orange because of the pricing apparently. There.
Clicked on that, would that update it now?
No, that data is what's when I do this refresh, it pulls the latest numbers that we have. Now, there is a chance that in the last hour maybe something's changed and we could do that. That's why that active BOM document, when you go into it, it automatically updates itself. But there are times when it is out of sync. And I think that's we're still evolving that whole cloud structure.
Question back here.
Okay.
So my question's on a little bit of a different topic, but on the manufacturer parts search, I noticed you talked about the acquire feature. So our company's kind of been working towards standardizing symbols and footprints. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my question is I noticed that you have footprints and symbols available on that. We've been working out of Nexus and transitioned to Concord Pro here a little while back. But that process of going to the standard symbols and footprints that we've created internally, it was fairly clunky in the past with the Nexus. I'm just wondering if that is an area that's been touched in 2020 or if that's maybe an area of potential future development.
Well, I don't know how clunky it was, but as far as if you're acquiring like a part that you already have symbols and footprints for, right, you can just disregard the models and just acquire in the data. It gives you a chance to do that when you go into that. The acquire takes that data and puts it into the create new component dialog for Concord or Nexus, and then you can decide what data you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. I can't really speak to if it's better than it was 2 years ago or a year ago. It seems quite usable, at least when I've tried it. And that is a big challenge because if you're not aware of that, next thing you know, you're going to have like 30 different footprints for 0805s.
Question?
Yes.
Are there any plans to add searches which include environmental compliance like REACH and RoHS 3 so
Well,
you could filter out on those?
Yeah, you can do that now if the data is included in the parameters for the from the part distributors. Any of those parameters you can search for, and if it's mill standard or RoHS or any of these things, you should be able to do that now to the extent that it's being represented or provided by the distributors.
So you're still relying on DigiKey or whoever to actually copy.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Is there a way to filter out suppliers whose stock is only overseas, and so that way, because obviously their price might be good, but with tariffs and everything these days, that price may all of a sudden go through the roof and not be a good deal.
Well, it's the only way that I know of to filter out a supplier. Oh, incidentally, just getting back to this gentleman's question, this is probably a dialogue you've seen before, where you can just delete these. These are the models that we're bringing in from the cloud. You can just delete those and use your own, link your own at that point. Okay, so let's go back to suppliers here. Sometimes the suppliers are linked here, like this is obviously in France, so you could uncheck that. I think the bigger problem is when you choose a Farnell or an RS Components, and they will, because they do have a site here in the US that they'll say, hey, that is available. And yet if you went to order that, you'd find out that stock is coming from somewhere else. So to answer your question, I don't know that we have that level of filtering on that right now.
So my company uses its own part numbering system. How do I link that with the ActiveBomb? Can I put my part numbers in ActiveBomb?
Yeah, when you create your components, you might have a template that is, whatever, my MPN or something. And so you have your part numbers in there, and then you can just simply come in here and turn on which column you want. So you would have that parameter would be showing up here somewhere, company part number, and you would just turn that on, and then it would show up in this spreadsheet. You can move these columns wherever you want.
So take it from our database to ActiveBomb?
If it's inside the components, and assuming that you're using Concord Pro or Nexus and that data is in there, then it's presented and available here. ActiveBomb is really a consumer of data from all kinds of different sources, and it allows you to consolidate and represent that as you see fit.
Okay, so first of all, the question I know we're all wondering about, the board with the mosquito in it, did it work?
We threw it away.
Okay.
I think I held on to it for many years, but because it was a classic, yeah.
Okay.
You don't often get boards with built-in bugs.
Okay, but the other thing I was wondering about, the lab I work at, we do all of our own assembly ourselves, and I wonder, does ActiveBomb have any way to track the number of a component you have in your shop? We had to write our own program for that for now.
Well, let's see. There is. You can put in entries of your own part numbers and you can put a starting inventory. But I'm not aware of anything that, like I've used accounting systems before where there's a command called build, where you build a board and it pulls that out of the inventory. That's not doing this right here yet. But that's certainly, you could see that this is a nice foundation especially for companies that have their own R&D parts stock and all that. It would be nice to know what that stock is. There may be something on the server side where that's possible to do. I'm just not aware of that.
What exists now, we have a picking place. And in theory, the number of parts, it's get tracked, all right? But I wouldn't
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's really a data flow or even a manpower kind of problem. You have to have the resource to allocate to putting all these numbers back in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to just verge into accounting a little bit, that's where that's reconciled from a business standpoint, is if you're stocking parts, you carry that as an inventory, and the system knows that if you build one of these, you've pulled down the inventory from that. But that's not tied in yet into this environment, but one could see where that's a possibility.
So this question is mainly applicable for ICs. Many times we would like to see drop-in replacement alternate for ICs. So does this kind of indicate which are like drop-in replacement for each other?
So you're saying like for an IC, say it's an op amp or a switching controller or something like that, and a Maxim part might be a drop-in replacement for a TI part.
Yep.
I'd have to try that out. I haven't tried it. Certainly with two terminal devices, it works pretty well, but that's a good question.
And another suggestion, kind of, many times we track some of the device like let's say LEM sensors. So we try LEM and Allegro sensors, and then we'll rate, hey, LEM is much better. If we can globally, and some of them they show it works and they doesn't work in they take out in the initial phase from manufacturing or market. So it would be nice if we can get a feature just like how we have 5-star rating that globally combines everybody's input, and then say if the IC has a 5-star rating, that means it's very good, it's noise immune, something like that. That makes people's life easy.
Yeah, now if you do have your own library set up on your server, you can put those ranks in. And so with your lessons learned on the given parts, you could rank those accordingly. And then even reference, you know, you could put a parameter in there that references a web link in your enterprise or on your own file system that could then drill down and explain why it's better based on, you know, the audibility of it in the case of a sound transducer. Yeah, I mean, they could do that. Again, the nice thing about Concord Pro is it's a centralized, it's a server for your enterprise. And any changes that they make, part choices, any extra annotated data, that carries through to anybody who uses that. There you go.
Not just within that.
Right. Right.
Questions? How much
right. Have to talk to somebody in sales. To be honest, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know.
Anything else?
So this was touched on a bit. I can see in the Active Bomb how you can identify if you have a project that's been mothballed for a while that you're pulling up again and needing to update, how you can find what the parts that have problematic availability are. Is there a way to actually streamline the process of then picking the replacements and getting the new parts into your design?
Well, there's a couple approaches. The one is, you know, when you go to the manufacturer part search, you would search on that, and then you get those recommended alternatives that, you know, say, you know, we're looking at, I'll go to something that's a little more widely substitutable. Let's see, let's pick a good category here. Again, I guess I'll just choose capacitors. That's an easy one because there's a lot of substitution for that. So yeah, when you run into a situation like that, you've had a project mothballed for a while, you go into this and you know, we do get these alternatives that are listed here. And you see the ones that have lower ratings, different color. Again, we addressed the question over there on how that is established. That's sort of like an internal indication that we provide, but this certainly gives you a shortcut. And just being able to put in the value, like if you're looking for a capacitor, just put in the capacitance and the geometry, and you're going to get listings immediately there. So it's not going to be right in ActiveBomb, but you just go to this separate panel.
So if you like put in the actual manufacturer part number up there, would that then filter down some of those parameters some more to get a match faster?
Yeah, what it's going to do, if you put in the actual part number, it's going to look, if provided that there's data out there, it's going to look at those parameters, and then it's going to have recommendations in that. And another place that we can do that is we can come in here, and for a given part, you can create or edit the part choice list. And then that really brings up the manufacturer part search. Even though this is add part choice, this is really the manufacturer part search that defaults to the description of the capacitor. So in this case, it's already showing you different choices for that given spec. You could add to that or check to that and then add that as a part choice. I mean, it doesn't get too much easier.
If you change a part number in the ActiveBomb to be a new part number based on that whole thing, it's been mothballed and now does it get propagated back down to the schematic level so that new part number is there?
It depends. If you've placed like a generic part, and it's just like, 10 microfarad tantalum capacitor, 25 volts. It's in and you're adding your part choices to that. When you update your part choices, you don't have to touch your schematic, because when it goes out and reconcile all of this, it's going to look at your part choices. It's going to bring that current information. Now, if what you've placed on your schematic is the specific part number, Chemet 1206, then you would need to, and if that's your style of part that you want to create, you would take your new part, create that, and then you would have to do a replacement on that. That's why they really recommend that you use a more generic approach, particularly for the R's and C's and L's.
Okay, thanks.
We got into that in our company, mostly because of it's our procurement that wants the flexibility to order. They reevaluate their supported vendors or supported parts regularly. So they need to be able to go in and say, okay, this week we're going to do business with Chemet. Oh, no, they were bad. We want to go to, TDK. And they wanted that level of flexibility. But we do the generic cap, MLCC, da-da-da.
The other thing that ActiveBomb, thank you for prompting me on this, but the other thing that ActiveBomb does is if you have a situation where your part changes and you're no longer using that Chemet part, that change can be made on that server. And then when you go into ActiveBomb to refresh, it's going to know that you don't have the current version of your server part, and it's going to give you an opportunity to update it. So that's another way for propagating all of these changes to any design that's going on. That's one of the values of the server, is that you have multiple groups, engineers, sites, et cetera, that are pulling from this. And if any of their designs are out of sync, they're going to be given an easy way to update that.
Now, to that end, if you just updated the part in your design, and then you go back, when it tries to propagate back into the server part, or the Conquer Pro, is that only that's limited by that person has to be a librarian?
They just have to have the permission of the server.
I don't think it updates automatically back to the server. You edit the component on the schematic, you're editing that instance of that component.
Yeah, but true. Yeah. Things like part choices, though, those are, my understanding is it's stored on the server. So when you change a part choice, you're actually essentially changing it on the server.
So it was mentioned the manufacturer's search. You can take parameters from there. Will it, when you go to put them into the component parameters, will it create the parameters there? Or do I have to have those individually created and populate them? Or can I just drop a group of parameters in there? And if they already exist, will it put extra ones in, like supplier or manufacturer 1 is already there, manufacturer 2 it drops in as manufacturer 2?
Well, when you create a component, you're basically creating the component. So whatever parameters you're moving in are going to go in there. If you've already created a component, and we're talking again integrated libraries, unfortunately, like the acquire process, that doesn't work for integrated libraries. What you would need to do is your use model would be, if you want another part choice, you could go in, whatever process you would to update your integrated libraries. I guess you would open those up and then add those extra parameters for the new manufacturer and the manufacturer part number, and then deploy that. So it's a little different process. Acquire from the context of integrated libraries, it doesn't give you anything. You need Concord Pro for the acquire function.
Yeah, I realize that. What I was wondering is, I can still use the manufacturer search. Can I take several parameters and just drop them into the integrated library part that's open and have that go in, and will it overwrite existing ones, or will it create new parameters for a second or third supplier or manufacturer?
Yeah, the only way that I know how to do that, but there might be a better way, is you could go into ActiveBomb and just place that part search or part choice, and it's going to bring all those parameters in, and then you can.
That's what they added new is in the manufacturer part panel. If you go to more parameters, you just click on a manufacturer part, and just add part. And it's just right from the panel. You couldn't really do that easily before, but it's added.
So you can put that right into the.
Right from the manufacturer part panel.
Okay, so that must be new for 20?
Not 20, it's
Okay.
19.
Okay.
But it's one of those things that snuck in that I couldn't do for a long time, and they added it. It's like.
Nice.
So it does go into the integrated libraries as well? Okay.
And then I don't know if it'll automatically implement them, but it'll add the manufacturer part. I don't know if it'll do the library part, but I'm schematic.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Comments? Okay, I think we should give our presenters a great thank you for this informative
thank you.
session.